What's up YouTube? Drew here, and this is a 2010 Prius, and if you're a Prius freak like I am, we've had like 20 of these in the last year. If you're a Prius freak like I am, you know about the issue when you start them and they go and they shake like absolutely awfully. It sounds like the bottom end is like falling out. Maybe one of the pistons is disconnected. Actually, what you're hearing, there's like a spring-loaded, it's almost like a clutch plate. It's not. These don't have a clutch. They don't have a torque converter. They have an engine and a power split device. There's two electric motors in there and a planetary gear system that connects those two electric motors, which could also function as a generator to the internal combustion engine, or ICE, and the output or input when you're regeneratively braking from the wheels. So there's a couple things that can cause that, and again, it's the spring-loaded plate that's making the majority of the sound. If your engine itself was making that sound, you're done. Turn off the video. You probably have a hole in your block and oil and or coolant leaking out. Anyways, there's a couple things that can cause that sound. Unfortunately, one of them is coolant, the head gasket between the top of the engine and the bottom. The many times it expands and contracts because this engine heats up and cools down several times during a drive cycle, where a regular car like that just heats up and cools down, once each for every time you drive it, right? So if your head gasket's worn and coolant's getting into the cylinders, the car sits. It sits for a while. It's cold. You start it, and it does that. The other reason, and there could be more, but the common reasons are this very complex EGR system. So here's the EGR valve. There's a EGR cooler where coolant from the engine actually cools the exhaust gases. They come through the valve. They go through this tube. They go into the intake manifold, which is in there. And then they have these tiny little ports, maybe about that big, maybe about as big around as a pencil, not quite as big around as a Sharpie. And there's an EGR port for each of the four cylinders. That gets buggered up. There was actually a Toyota service bulletin on this. And the EGR, the valve itself can stick and be open when it shouldn't be, which will throw off your air-fuel ratio. If one of these is plugged and the other one isn't, one's not getting enough air and the other three are getting that much more than they should. So before I go any further, I want to throw it out there. There's a guy that had like a 45-minute video. He's like the car care guy or something like that. If you check my channel, he's one of my liked videos and I subscribe to him. He's the one that gave me this idea. But it's buried in a 45-minute video. I'm just showing you guys how to quickly eliminate the possibility of it being your EGR system, which I hope for your sake that it is, because if it's the head gasket, that's a lot more work, and you're going to need to check to see if one of those cylinders was full enough of water and that piston came up. Water can't be compressed and it could actually bend the connecting rod, right? So all we do, I use two extensions, a swivel. I like the impact swivels because they don't swivel too much to still be in a working range, and a 10mm deep socket 3/8 drive. I loosened that bottom screw a couple turns. I took the top one out and I shoved a metal putty knife in there. And basically what that does for you is it blocks that EGR flow. So the system can still function as it thinks it should, but there's not going to be any of those uneven combustion gases, or if that's stuck open and it shouldn't be, it's blocked right there. Do not drive your car like this indefinitely, because it'll destroy stuff. If you're getting, the other big symptom for the EGR is you'll be driving, and if you're on the gas like hard, your car is really smooth. But if you're on it very lightly, keeping up speed with the internal combustion engine on, and you get this a little bit, right? That is, again, this issue. So, I mean, at your own risk. Please, I'm not responsible for anything you guys do. I just try to give you good advice and trust that you're, decent under the hood of a car, right? But, at your own risk, you can try replicating your symptoms with this in here if you can do it quickly. Don't do it all day, because it's like putting your hand over your mouth and running, I suppose, right? But this is a very quick way to eliminate. And again, hopefully, if you've, like, I'm going to start this car in a minute, and if it doesn't rattle, hallelujah. If it does still, then I probably have a head gasket and possibly an engine. And, I'm obviously going to do the right thing and repair it, correctly with all genuine Toyota parts. But my big suspicion is that this is going to make this car start and run smooth. So let's find out. So now I'm going to pull this out. And that's success. So I know this isn't a repair video, it's just a test video, but I want to show you guys what I found. I mean, look at just how disgusting. And that's like physically built up in there. This one has, I don't know, that's at least a millimeter. I'm going to try to get some of that stuff out without dropping it back into the engine. I think that's the culprit, the PCV valve, because this is really alarming. All that oil there, pardon my mess, spilled all over this. There's literally a pool of oil. Completely insane. So the only explanation for how that got there is through the PCV valve. So it's pools there. I mean, there was like a pool. It's all over here, spilled in there, made a puddle. The only thing I can think of is it sits there. Hey, it's like an oil bath, right? If any of you guys work on 50s cars, that's how they used to have filters. The air would come down, hit oil, and then come back up, and all the contaminants would stick in the oil. But boy, oh boy, I can't imagine that that's very good for the combustion. That'll all be cleaned. The PCV valve will be replaced. Just wanted to show you guys, look at how thick that is. That's all got to be cleaned out of there. And then that's what I meant about each individual port. They're actually not that bad. But yeah, definitely issues here. Gonna clean this up. That's the one from the PCV valve. Gonna clean this up and put her back together. Okay, so it's been a day. And I am going to show you guys, it's the ideal conditions for this thing to knock like crazy or make its rattling sound. Because the colder it is, the worse it is. So I'm going to go ahead and start this for you guys. And then we'll go right under the hood. Now, obviously, just like last time, you know, it's going to make a lot of sound because you're right underneath the hood, but it's not going to make that death rattle. And if you're watching this video again, you know what that sounds like. Give it a couple more seconds to prove itself. All right, so the gist of it is that there was two things going on that you need to know about. One, the EGR system was severely clogged, severely. I'll bet you I took about 2 gallons of brake fluid and carb cleaner out that was pitch black, completely solid, couldn't see through it at all, pitch black, just like this button right here. Before I started to get like, you know, brown and semi see-through. Used brushes. That's like Harbor Freight sells a kit for a couple bucks of different brushes. They're like spiraled wire with polyester. Don't use metal. It's like hard polyester bristles. I use those. Basically, the port that goes into the side of the intake goes all the way across, and then there's several little ports, 4 of them, that go down to it. So if you bottle brush each one of those 4 and you bottle brush the big guy and then just keep filling them and rinsing them with brake cleaner, you can clean that intake manifold. It's much less expensive to replace it if you are Toyota because it can be replaced in the amount of time it could be taken off and put back on versus the hour and a half or 2 I spent cleaning it. You know, it's cheaper for them to just, you know, the plastic manifold costs next to nothing, even though they probably get a couple $100s for it, right? So the other big thing, real big thing, if you take off your throttle body and there's a pool of oil, that means your PCV valve has failed. That's the only explanation for how oil would get into your intake. While you're doing this job, for $5 that the Toyota dealership charges, you should change your PCV valve anyways. But a rapid and dramatic increase in oil consumption is usually the PCV valve. And you know, that was the case with this car. So it is fixed. It drives absolutely perfectly. After I completed the repair last night, I drove it and it didn't have any of that, you know, low speed, moderate speed, like pulsation feeling. That was basically a misfire under a light load that was happening. The oil and the clogged ports combined were making this thing run pretty miserably. So this is Drew. I just wanted to show you guys this video. Hopefully it helps. If it does, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Again, the purpose of this video was to show you guys how to test your EGR system, not how to fix it, and hopefully just for your guys' sake out there, you guys and girls that are watching this, I really hope it's not your head gasket, because if it is, that's a lot more miserable. But if it is, hang in there. It's an opportunity to learn something, and, you know, hopefully you can survive the financial side of it. This is Drew. If it's helpful, give it a thumbs up. Thanks. Bye.